Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, the podcast that helps aircraft owners and aviation businesses learn and understand the complex world of aviation insurance and risk management. From the basic principles of aviation insurance to risk management techniques and updates on the aviation insurance market, the Aviation Insurance Podcast is your guide to traverse the world of aviation insurance. Now, here's your host, Tim Bonnell.
Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. And I'm excited today to welcome someone I've known for many years, Keith Brown. He and my dad used to work together years and years ago, and have worked together in both directly and indirectly. And it's been a pleasure to do the same with Keith. Keith has been in the aviation business, aviation insurance business since 1993. He worked for Rollins, Burdick & Hunter, which is now Aon, and went on to work in claims, spent 15 years at the Cessna Finance Corporation, and now owns Brown & Company USA, a national surveying consulting company specializing in aviation, UAS, and agricultural occurrences. He's an active member of the Aviation Insurance Association, and I always appreciate he's always willing to step up and speak for our educational sessions. So I appreciate him doing that. He always does a great job. And he's a past president of the Office of Flying Adjusters. He's been featured, quoted in Private Pilot magazine, and served as a qualified general aviation expert witness for the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the U.S. Federal Court in New York. He's a licensed pilot, holds a remote pilot certificate. He's a fourth generation grower and held his landowner agricultural chemical purchase and application certificates. He also holds Kansas insurance license, property and casualty, personal lines and crop in good standing since 1994, and has all kinds of other aviation qualifications, which is why I invited him on to do this interview today. So Keith, thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
You're welcome. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So let's just get off with kicked off here with some questions about claims. Claims are always exciting. They're interesting, but a lot of times, there's just a lot of unknown. That's not the side that a lot of people spend time on. And obviously they don't want to spend time on as an aircraft owner or an aviation business. So it's always nice to dig behind the scenes and hear from someone who is involved with it day to day. And so my first question would be, what has been the most exciting thing about adjusting aviation insurance claims over the past year or two?
Well, specifically the last year or two, it would be following the markets of the aircraft values, salvage values, repair costs. I think as everyone has known, whether it be in their business or professional life, they've seen things increase, whether it be food, electricity, and now on our side, aviation parts. Finding fewer people that are qualified to complete repairs, and when you do find them, their shop's full. And you may have to wait a year, maybe even two, depending on the extent of your damage. I don't know if that's necessarily qualifies as exciting, but it's definitely interesting to chase when you see sometimes salvage values exceeding the cost of the airplane when they purchased it 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And I think that makes owners look back and go, my goodness, look how much our industry has changed.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic really brought a lot of changes, an increase in the demand for general aviation, the supply chain issues, which I think you just highlighted. It led to, the parts availability being a challenge. I know the cost of handling claims has increased dramatically. And then in those liability situations where you've caused damage to an aircraft, what you just highlighted is huge, right? They can be down waiting on a part for a year or two. And when you've got, loss of use and the extra expenses for them to replace that aircraft while it's down, that can add up quite a bit, couldn't it?
Yes, correct. And you look at the manufacturers. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. We have several major manufacturers with Textron Aviation and Learjet, Bombardier. And they simply have not been supporting legacy aircraft with parts being on the shelf. I do think they're willing and able to stamp out some parts, but it just takes time to find the person who's qualified, get the drawings, and actually get it done. And that just adds to the overall time of getting it repaired.
Yeah. So the bottom line is claims are more interesting to handle than the fact that they take a lot longer. The parts aren't available. The everything's more expensive. The values have changed dramatically, and sometimes people haven't updated them to be with the times, which is never a fun conversation, I'm sure. So that's kind of the state of things today, right? So lot of people haven't had a claim. That's good news. But what are the general high-level steps involved in adjusting a whole or physical damage claim?
Well, the first and foremost is we always need to confirm coverage. And that is the high level word that we're going to talk about, I guess. A lot of people fill out their application. They may submit it to their broker, and the application simply has not confirmed your coverage. And now it's time to do so, whether it be providing documents on your pilot or your aircraft or where it's stored, etc. And that comes down to managing perceptions and expectations. People expect a claim to get submitted. Possibly myself or a company representative come out, look at the airplane, give them a value, write them a check like they have on their house and their car, and that simply is not the case. So we have to manage perceptions on aviation. It's a very specific and limited industry. We need to get people involved to give quotes, and that kinds of things take time.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You have to confirm coverage, and so that really that involves collecting a lot of information, correct? So for an aircraft and a pilot both, what all is needed from an aircraft owner or pilot involved in a physical damage loss?
Well, that usually will depend on the policy. Some policies are very broad that they say we cover any pilot. We cover any aircraft that's approved by the chief pilot and the chief director of maintenance. But in general, we need to prove that you are a licensed pilot. And that being a pilot certificate, a medical, and a biennial flight review, and in some cases, possibly a type certificate rating. We need to see copies of those. Just because it was written on an application doesn't mean that it's there. And possibly someone has just made a mistake and has forgotten. On the aircraft side, it depends what has been damaged. Airframe, logbooks need to be reviewed, propeller, turbine engine, all of these things need to be looked at. So, if it's just a simple hanger rash where we have a wingtip, we might only need to look at airframe sides of things. But if there's an unfortunate incident that has a gear up landing, now we're looking at the airframe, the engine, and the propeller or turbine or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so I think the challenge that I've been aware of is, aircraft owners, pilots need to maintain these records, and they need to be accessible, and someone else needs to know where they're at besides just that aircraft owner and pilot, right? I'm sure you've had those type of losses where records aren't available. Has that happened very often?
It happens more often than we care to, and usually it's in a very unfortunate circumstance. A pilot typically knows where his records are and where the aircraft records are. Where they do not become available is if someone is injured.
Yeah.
Where they're in the hospital or even worse, that we have a fatal injury and the spouse or the next of kin can't find them. I don't know that it's a fix-all, but a recommendation I would have is that these individuals are filling out their application once a year, and they're saying, I do have a pilot certificate and it was issued on X day. I don't have mine memorized, and I have a feeling a lot of pilots are pulling out their logbooks and looking at that. I think it would be quite easy just to snap a photo with your iPhone or something and send them to your broker or send them to your next of kin. Let them know where they are. I know I kind of said send them to your broker, making more work for you, but right. It could be uploaded into a file, possibly even sent to underwriters, and they have it in the event that you're unavailable on vacation or something. Same thing with the logbooks. They don't know when the aircraft's been inspected, so why not just take a simple photograph of it and have it on hand?
Yeah, I think that the logbook can be a big challenge as well for the aircraft. I know sometimes they're stored at a shop or in some file no one knows about, and that can be challenging, especially when it's someone else having to find it, and you're not there. You can't answer it for any of those unfortunate situations you mentioned. Any difference in handling the liability claims as opposed to the physical damage?
Oh yes, most definitely. So liability is usually damage that has been alleged you caused to someone else. Again, managing perceptions, managing expectations. I think the best rule of thumb, both physical damage and liability, is to just get on the phone and make a phone call, send an email, just let someone know you are there. You don't necessarily need to show up the next day, but I think immediate contact And when you do reach them, being the claimant, just let them tell their story. Let them express what they have and what they feel their damages are, and just let them talk. Then go and look at the property or the damage or whatever they say is done. But you need to listen.
Right. Yeah, I think that's, I know I've heard you talk on this, and a lot of times having the adjuster plays a really important role in a good settlement, especially when you got an upset claimant. I know you do a lot of ag chemical type of losses, and that's been pretty important. And you kind of take that kind of approach, and it makes a big impact just in how it's received is to listen. And I really appreciate about your approach on those type of things. You may have already answered this earlier, but are there any new trends you're seeing in aviation claims today that are different from handling claims, several years ago?
Oh, yes. So my father's been doing this since 1968, and I've been doing it since 1993. And things have greatly changed. One, with the shortage of staff, fewer companies, fewer markets, both domestically and internationally. It used to be where you would go and look at every single broken airplane or every single liability case. There was a lot of people in the industry. That has changed, especially with the advent of technology. That a lot of companies handle what they can over the desk. And I understand it. Businesses are in business to make money. And services such as mine or another expert or a mechanic, they do cost money. So when they feel it's a simple claim, the company may handle it over the desk. The only danger I do see to that is that sometimes an aircraft owner, big or small, has never met their broker. They've never met you possibly, and they certainly may have never met the insurance company.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they have an accident, whether it be big or small, and they still haven't met anyone. And they're asked to provide all of this information over an email, and they have a couple of phone calls, and the process does take a little bit of time. And then a settlement is reached. And again, they've never met anyone. I think the companies are very good at determining when that becomes necessary, usually when someone is hurt, and usually almost always when there is liability, because you need to see the damage. But on aircraft, I think sometimes it pays to go see it. We're dealing with an aging fleet, and sometimes there may be corrosion that is inside of an aircraft that you just cannot see over a phone call and an email and a quick snapshot. And corrosion just generally is not covered as a part of a policy. And I think those things need to be investigated. But again, I understand it. I know why it's done. And if I had to handle every single claim all of these companies had, I simply could not do it. So there is a reason for it. But that's the biggest change.
Yeah, the technology, the communication has definitely changed it a lot more digital. Obviously, more serious claims you definitely still see, but there's a lot more just take a snapshot of the damage and we'll look at it type of thing. Okay. No, that's really good perspective. Have you noticed anything concerning pilots or related to pilots, aircraft, or aviation operations, as you've been adjusting claims in recent years?
Well, again, we're going to go back to the last 2 years that has made the greatest change, and we're going back to values. I mentioned earlier that, we're always watching how prices have increased either on salvage or parts or just airplanes. And with our aging fleet, the pilots want to hold that aircraft, and it becomes much more valuable. We have very few producers of single engine piston aircraft, not like we had back in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And those prices have greatly increased. And I think that a pilot, such as myself, where you own an airplane, you think, oh my goodness, I have $80,000 on my Skylane. And you think that's enough because it's way more than you paid for it, but it simply is not. You just cannot get the aircraft repaired for that if you even have a simple prop strike, and then with an engine teardown, or if you have a bent firewall. The market has increased, and I think people haven't looked back at what they really have invested: avionics, interior, paint. On the pilot side of things, I think just time has caused a lot of pilots to forget certain things. I do like basic med. I think it has a purpose. But I think in the course of 4 years, the pilot forgets that he needs to renew that on the second year with a course. And so I think people need to pay attention to the FARs. They need to pay attention to what ADSB does and why it's required and where they have to use it so they don't get themselves in a pickle. So the rules have changed. The timing has increased. The values have increased. And I don't know that we have a good focus on people watching that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, flying is safe, but you always have to be proficient and train a lot and for it to be safe. And I think that principle, as you talked about, it really stood out to me. I remember one of the Cessna 172s we insured, 5 years ago was $35,000, and they sold it a year ago for $150,000. Pretty significant. I think a lot of people don't understand that in a claim. I know in what we know from my perspective is typically, you're going to get a repair bid, obviously, but you also look at the salvage costs. And if those two amounts are pretty close, or more than, the insured value, that aircraft's going to be totaled. So even if there was enough money to make the repair, it's more economically feasible for, the aircraft to total. How often do you see, and with these value issues that you're talking about, are you seeing that more frequently than you have in the past?
More often than not. I would say that we do a constructive total loss on better than 50% of the claims that come through due to salvage values.
Really?
It's almost always on legacy aircraft. It's the gentleman who owns the Skylane or the Bonanza or the Saratoga. They've had it for 20 years. They kind of have forgotten how much they have invested over those last 20 years. And they really haven't looked at what the market is demanding for that aircraft today, or what it would cost to have the engine torn down or overhauled. And so I think there's a lot of that's going to happen into the future unless values are allowed to be increased. And you did bring up one good point I like, is that safety. One thing I do see with pilots, general aviation pilots, Part 91, they do have their fun airplane. They have their Piper Cub or whatever, and they fly 5, 10, maybe 20 hours a year. I don't know that necessarily is enough to make you proficient in the aircraft. I think you've been flying it for 50 years and you feel good about it, and your pride says that you can get out of anything that you get yourself into. But why not just invite a safety pilot and let's go have a hamburger or go have some breakfast and go practice every now and again. Part 135 aircraft definitely have to do it every year. And we trust them with our lives. So why not? If we're going to trust ourselves with our own lives, well, what's wrong with a little bit more education?
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've seen it time and again. There are pilots and aircraft operators who are safety and training minded, and they typically have fewer issues than those who are a little less focused on that. I don't know if you've noticed that, but we certainly have from our perspective. I think that's some really good stuff there that, anybody who has an aircraft or aviation insurance policy today, once a year at least, they get a form, from their broker saying, hey, here's the information that's on file. Here's the insured value. Here's your pilot information. I mean, a lot of people, we don't want to mess with paperwork because there's too much of it today. There's too many emails, too many letters. And a lot of people, the goal is just to get the cheapest price. And this is a good example. These constructive total losses. I hadn't heard that statistic yet. So that's a key takeaway for me, is more than 50% is going to constructive total losses on these legacy aircraft. So I think a key takeaway is to take those seriously, to really examine the values, to really make sure your logbook information is correct, because an insurance policy is a warranty, saying that application, the information you're providing that you're representing is correct. If not, that can jeopardize coverage. Correct?
Correct.
Yep.
And again, the 50% number, it truly is legacy aircraft. It's going to be the older airplanes.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. So if you could advise any aircraft owner or aviation business what they can do in advance to prepare for a claim, having a claim, what would that be?
Again, I think we touched on it briefly. When you're going through your logbooks, let's take some photographs of your license, your medical, your BFR. Let's take pictures of your annual inspection. Make sure your broker knows about it. When you get the application from your broker, complete it and complete it correctly. I think brokers are very generous in trying to already have much of that completed based upon what they know via a conversation or possibly a site visit. But you need to look at it. You need to make sure that what they have written down, your address, your telephone number, where the aircraft is stored, make sure it's correct, because if it's been misrepresented, it definitely could create a little hiccup if you do have a claim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, emergency response plans aren't necessarily a claim specialty, but you're a part of that. A lot of corporate operators, for instance, they go through a planning process, because the best time to be prepared for a claim is before one happens and not in response to it. And so I think that's some great advice, making sure that both your pilot and aircraft logbooks are copied. They're somewhere where, someone else knows where they are, hopefully multiple people. People know who to contact in the event of a loss, so the broker and carrier's contact information, all that information, having it up front will make having to go through a claim and deal with the various issues that come with one much easier in advance than when you're dealing with stress or grief or shock, whatever it may be. So I think that's really good advice. So is there anything else that, just regarding handling aviation claims, the industry today, that we may have missed in the conversation that you'd like to share, or any closing thoughts?
Well, I think there's a lot of negative connotation that goes on out there about insurance companies. I know a lot of people just don't care for it, or possibly they see a commercial on TV that's not favorable for an insurance company. Aviation is very different, in my opinion. And I think if people really were to visit with their broker or possibly read their insurance policy, what you get for your money is incredibly generous. And the aviation industry is very small. I think there's 16, 17 companies out there that just do aviation within the United States. That's pretty tiny. You look at registered aircraft, there's between 250 and 400,000 registered aircraft in the United States. I have more cars than that in the city of Wichita.
Right.
So the individuals that are handling your claims, they know aviation. Most are pilots. A good many of them are A&Ps. And then you go back and look at the policy at what it affords, or possibly what you could purchase. It is very generous, very generous. You can buy sometimes loss of use. They do try to find like kind of quality parts with an aging fleet. Sometimes that means it's unavailable, but if it is, all aircraft need to be repaired exactly the same. And I think a lot of people get a misguided thought in their head that they need to have their aircraft repaired by the manufacturer to maintain the pedigree of the logbook. The manufacturer or any other repair facility you choose all must follow the maintenance and repair manual. No one can just come up with their own idea of how to fix the airplane. So they should almost always be fixed exactly the same, with the same kind of parts, with the same 337s that are entered into it. Again, if you let the insurance policy work for you and the individual who you're talking to work for you, I think you'll find out the policies are very generous.
Yeah, in my experiences, and in many circumstances, the insurance companies will do what they can to find coverage. I know in other areas like auto or home, a lot of times that perception or even in experiences, they try to find ways to decline coverage. But I think most and many of our aviation insurers err on the side of generosity in finding coverage, where others may, where other industries may not. That's not the case for every claim and every carrier, but that's definitely been my experience, because it's a smaller industry, and obviously the losses can be more significant. One of the things you mentioned, I think, I want to hit on real quick. You talked about that like, kind, and quality. Because the policies are written on an agreed amount or stated value basis, if it's a total loss, the check's going to have the amount stated on the insured value stated on the declarations page of the policy. But it's a partial loss, on a Legacy 182, right? We had a prop strike, for instance. You can't just go, if the prop's almost TBO, they're not going to get a new prop, are they?
No, they're not. And again, that goes back to my earlier comment about managing perceptions and managing expectations. And a prop strike does not mean an overhaul on your engine. And hangar rash does not mean getting a new paint scheme put on your aircraft. And a scratch on the windshield does not mean factory brand new. There are used parts out there. There are a plethora of salvage facilities out there. And people cannot mistake their insurance policy for becoming a maintenance policy or a restoration policy. That's not what it is intended to do. So on a stated value claim, I think people need to understand that.
Yeah, I think that's big. I mean, insurance policy is to indemnify the person, basically to restore you to the state you would have been had the loss not occurred. It is not ever meant to allow a profit. You cannot profit from an insurance claim. And I think that's a concept a lot of people don't understand. I get calls, I get, people who see this podcast or one of the blog posts on our website. And I just this last week, I had someone ask me about this. And they're like, where's depreciation? I go, well, it's a total loss. We got this, but in a partial loss, their job is to restore you to where you would have. You cannot profit from it. And so I think that's I'm glad you said that about the like, con, and quality, because I think that's a huge misperception, especially on a partial loss and a legacy aircraft. It's not gonna be better than it was. We're going to restore you to what it would have been. And I'm sure, just based on how you phrased that so eloquently, that's been a major headache of yours, sitting in the adjuster seat, having to share bad news, with the claimant, regards to their expectations of what they should get and what they can't. So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think more times than not, aircraft owners understand it. They don't like it, but they understand it.
Yeah, I get that. Well, Keith, I really appreciate your time today. It's always interesting to visit with you and to hear what you have going on, and to just hear what's going on in the world of claims. And so just thank you for taking your time to share with us today. I'm sure we'll ask you back on down the road, and maybe have you share some of those crazy claim stories that you can share. So thank you very much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for this episode, folks. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes, and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aeris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit aerisinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: these episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.